I am so excited about this panel. This is the Hempfest panel, Consumers' Right to Know, Understanding Today's Legal Market and How to Vacate the Past, which is also expungement depending on which state you're in. So I'm going to give all of you guys a couple minutes to talk about yourselves. I'm going to ask you to talk into the front of the mic, not to the side of the mic, and make sure to pay attention to that guy in the blue. So if he's waving at you, that means he can't hear you, okay? Fantastic. Go for it, Bonnie.
Thank you, Danielle. My name is Bonnie Fong, and I'm a partner at C3 Law Group. We focus primarily on cannabis cases, doing cannabis work for businesses, retailers, producer, processors, and also right now we're challenging the constitutionality of the marijuana advertising laws.
I'm Dominic Corva. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for the Study of Cannabis and Social Policy. And I am here in my capacity, especially as Chair of the Alliance Legislative Committee, whose priority is to get cannabis vacation law passed in the legislature next year, which was voted the number 2 priority of that trade association, which is very, very unusual. That makes it a very unusual trade association. It was a non-economic, non-business thing that was the number 2 priority. So I'm here to help get that done, especially.
My name is Aaron Pelly. I started out several years ago representing cannabis patients, and all of my outlaws eventually became businessmen. By virtue of that, I became a corporate lawyer. I don't know that anybody says they want to grow up and be a corporate lawyer, but that's what happened. So my desire to be Perry Mason was dashed. I now work at a firm where I have several attorneys all in different facets of corporate law in order to represent the I-502 community.
My name is Mitzi Vaughn. I grew up always wanting to be a corporate lawyer. Not really. I wanted to be a fighter pilot, but women couldn't do it. I am an attorney, and I actually am a corporate lawyer. I work for a company in Canada that does basically, we're like an incubator for cannabis businesses. We build out buildings and lease equipment in buildings, and we help people by consulting with them and teaching them how to use the equipment and how to run a cannabis business, because a lot of people don't know how to do that. Before that, I was the managing attorney with Greenbridge Corporate Counsel, which was a corporate, it still is. I left, but it didn't. It's a corporate firm that deals only with cannabis businesses and has since 2012. So I've been doing this since 2013. I'm also general counsel for the Alliance, which means I'm one of their lawyers. And I'm here also in my capacity, as Dominic said, of an advocate. This isn't about corporate law for me, this is about justice. So.
Hi everyone, I'm Pete Holmes. I'm Seattle City Attorney. I was a corporate lawyer for about 25 years before I ran for this office. In fact, mostly over issues regarding drug policy reform and police reform. So I am now at the start of my 3rd term. I'm on mayor number 5, but I'm at my 3rd term, and I'm really happy to be here. Mitzi, we'll talk about the fighter pilot test as well. I can't believe how much we actually have some stuff in common.
So there we go. Mitzi, what consumer protections are in place now that cannabis is legal? What do consumers need to know regarding cannabis in their jobs, regarding cannabis in their apartments, regarding cannabis in testing? Like, what's happened since legalization to protect consumers?
Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that your cannabis can be tested and you can know what you are consuming, which was incredibly critical, because if something is grown and processed in somebody's basement, you don't know if there's 20 cats down there or what's going on, and that's from a real story. So that's the best part. The downside to this is that because it's still federally illegal, and because Washington has chosen to go this route, there are very few protections for either patients or users in terms of your job, in terms of your apartment. Basically, if your landlord doesn't want you to consume cannabis on the premises, your lease probably already says you have to comply with federal law, and that person can evict you. If you want to go to work for a company that is dedicated to a drug-free workplace, whether that be because they receive money from the feds, think Boeing, right? They get a ton of money from the federal government, and one of the conditions of receiving that money is maintaining a drug-free workplace. I had clients who did not consume cannabis, but invested in the cannabis industry and were fired. I had a client who leased a building to a cannabis business, and they were fired. It's very serious, and you can imagine Boeing gets billions of dollars from the federal government, and they're not messing around. So there are really no protections except for if you have an underlying disability in your workplace, you might be able to get some protections from that, but not by virtue of your use of cannabis. So we have a lot of work to do, but a lot of it hinges on what we do at the federal level. And so, I say this all the time, and I'll say it again, just because it's legal in Washington doesn't mean we're done. We got a lot to do. So, yeah.
Bonnie, why is expungement or vacationing so important? Can people currently expunge? Can people currently vacate their cannabis convictions? Can they vacate records of conviction if they have charges or if they have pending charges? And are there special rules around DUIs? What is vacationing or expungement? Let's start there.
Okay, that's a compound question there. Okay, well, vacating your criminal records means that basically employers and housing officials can't see those kinds of convictions on your records. It doesn't mean that it's not a part of your record and people can go looking for it in court records, but it just means that when people are looking at Watch or WSP patrol records, then they're not going to be able to easily view them. And this is really important for anyone who's had a cannabis conviction, because when they are allowed to look this up simply just by going on the internet, your employer can see that you've had a cannabis conviction. And just as Mitzi said, there's not a lot of protection, especially in an at-will state, around how you can fight those kinds of convictions and then making their employment decisions. So in a way, if you don't vacate your records, then you are carrying your convictions along with you for your entire life. And this is going to affect your ability, like Mitzi said, to be able to get jobs, to get housing opportunities, to get student loans. It's a really important step for you to be able to take that off your record so far as housing and employers can see, so that you can move on with your life and your life can be open to better opportunities. Yes, people can vacate their cannabis convictions. There's a certain kind of charge in Washington that you're not able to vacate. Those are usually violent offenses as defined under Washington law, crimes against persons, and felony DUIs and physical control offenses. So on the whole, yes, depending on how many convictions you've had and how long they've occurred and whether you have pending charges, you can typically vacate cannabis convictions. What else did you ask?
I think that kind of covered it.
Covered it all. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Pete, the City of Seattle currently has an executive order, to my understanding, to vacate cannabis convictions. Where is this at? What's the timeline? And what kind of legislative vehicle could help the City of Seattle and other jurisdictions to accomplish their vacationing goals?
Sure. Well, a couple of corrections. There's no executive order. I, earlier this year, moved the Seattle Municipal Court to vacate the convictions of all convictions that have been entered in the City of Seattle, which is the limit of my jurisdiction. The court has yet to rule on that. But I would just add a few things. Again, this was a motion to vacate all 652 convictions is what we found. My office, assuming that the motion is granted by the court, my office will then dismiss all of those cases. In contrast to expungement, where anyone can individually seek expungement, which means really eradicating the entire paper trail. You can go and get a court order, which means that it's very labor intensive. It means you got to go to the police department where you were arrested and make sure that your arrest records have been physically removed and destroyed. That's the way you expunge a record. But what we've asked for is simply vacate the conviction, meaning you're no longer convicted. You can honestly say you're not convicted, and then we will move to dismiss the case. So there will not be any record within the city of Seattle other than the arrest record, which is probably gone anyway for most of these records, just through similar, just destruction of files. I don't know if that helps, but no executive order. We're waiting. Stay tuned. Watch and see what the Seattle Municipal Court does. They did ask for additional briefing. I'm happy to go into some of the concerns that the court had, but we believe it's a good motion that should be granted, and then I'm looking to replicate this across the state. We've been trying to do this every session of the legislature since I-502 passed. I'll close, Danielle, with one point, is that really underlying all of this, there's a basic notion about our democracy, and that is crimes are defined by your elected legislators, and that can include the people when it's through initiative. And when conduct is no longer considered a crime by the majority of the people, then the very legitimacy of law enforcement is begged when arrests and prosecutions continue. This should be across the state that we try to vacate these judgments, because the people have spoken. This should not be a crime, and you should not bear a lifetime mark or a record of having committed a crime that the majority of the people in this state have said is not a crime. So anyway, that's what we're trying to do here in Seattle, and I hope it will be replicated across the state. I hope our legislator in Olympia in January can give us statewide relief to actually short circuit a lot of this.
The City of Seattle is sponsoring bills that will, do they have legislative bills that they're talking about to be able to do that?
Pretty much every year I have, the City of Seattle has a legislative agenda. I have my own as a separately elected official. Anytime if there's something like this that has not been adopted by the city, I can go and propose that myself. And so we've lobbied for this every year since 502 passed, and just not been able to get anywhere. My hope is maybe with Democratic majorities in the next session that we'll be able to make some headway on this and other issues.
That'd be awesome. Hey Dominic, what kind of legislative bills do you expect to see in 2019 regarding this type of vacation expungement?
Well, we have one bill specifically, the Fitzgibbons bill, which I think is what Pete's referring to. It's been introduced since 2015. These legislative vehicles kind of get into a rut. They're held up by different things, but they're kept alive to advance them at a more opportune time. And this may be a more opportune time. The Fitzgibbons bill, the issue with the Fitzgibbons bill primarily is that it has a fiscal note. What Pete was describing in terms of the difficulty of gathering together all the records and making sure all that's in order, that's like an administrative friction, basically, on getting something done. And it costs money to make that happen. And so that's been kind of the big challenge, I think, to the Fitzgibbons bill, is that it has a fiscal note that is $400,000. And so we see that as the primary weakness of that bill. But we are also taking a look at another broader criminal justice reform bill, the New Hope Act, which has two co-sponsors in common with the Fitzgibbons bill. The New Hope Act, what it does actually, instead of automatically vacating, is that it's a bill that's supposed to basically reduce the administrative work involved in getting it done. And it applies to all sorts of other, not just cannabis convictions. So it's, in general, a broad criminal justice reform effort. And there's been folks working on that. And so what we kind of want to do is start a dialogue between these two bills, especially since there's two co-sponsors in common, and kind of take a look at, with what Pete referred to again as what looks like a pretty big Democratic gain in the legislature, certain things become more easy, and the co-sponsors of both these bills are all Democrats. So, that can make a difference. kind of hear the governor's office might be thinking about doing some partnering for some nonviolent possession stuff. So the big picture, though, is that like California is also facing a similar conundrum, even though they already have this vacation process by initiative. Costs money, but since it was a voter initiative, you can get it done. Legislature won't approve things that cost money, but it has to be voter initiative. But the thing is, it costs money, and it still is a pain. And there are several efforts underway in California, according to Omar Figueroa, who couldn't make it in time for this panel, but he'll be here later. That's kind of the challenge now, is like dealing with how much it kind of costs to do this one by one, and seeing what can be done about that. There's even a Code for America program that is attempting to solve the problems with essentially, writing algorithms that can help make that process more efficient. So, it's a bigger, broader context. It's part of criminal justice reform at large in the country, and I think that it would be great if we could start leading on stuff like that instead of following other states on stuff like that, and so that's what we're working on. Thank you.
Aaron, I heard, is this working yet? There it goes. I heard that Cultiva Law has a vacation or expungement clinic that's for free going on at Hempfest all weekend. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what it is and what it entails?
Sure. Actually, at the back of the tent here today at the Hemposium, we have two attorneys, and then also myself will be back there. We're providing the free service of first trying to help you determine whether your conviction qualifies for, we use the term vacation of conviction, other states use the word expungement. That's this distinction in law, but most places, to make it easier, will call it expungement because it confuses people when you say you want your vacation. I don't think it's the same thing, right? Yeah. So, so we're back there today, Cultiva Law, and then both my attorneys, Heidi Ernest and Sam Mendez, are in the back helping people get that done. We're also, our firm are advocates of a lot of the criminal justice reforms that we're talking about. Some of the ones Bonnie was talking about, the fact that you get a DUI is something where you can't get that vacated for 10 years afterwards. There's no real policy reason behind that. It's an argument that the prosecutor's office at the King County made and won on that was ridiculous. We're advocating for essentially stopping some of the things that frustrate people's ability to consume, the ability to consume in the city of Seattle or anywhere else where you've got a major metropolitan city. As you were pointing out, you can't consume in your home. Most places and apartments won't let you smoke. We have a Clean Air Act that won't let me smoke in a bar. They won't let me vape in a bar. And the city of Seattle and other counties won't let us open any place and allow those things to happen. So there's a lot of legislative work at multiple levels that we're trying to advocate for to try and get things so that it's fair. Because the truth is that if I'm African American and I'm poor and I want to go smoke somewhere, I'm going to have to do it illegally because I'm going to have to smoke outside. And that's illegal. So we're trying and create these opportunities for people to do those things and legislatively make some of these changes. So all the people here that are fighting for all these different things, they're making a difference, and you guys can make a difference by voting. Damn it. Seriously, don't think it doesn't matter, it does.
So you touched on something there, Aaron, where you're talking about poor people and people that identify as people of color, that they are adversely and more disproportionately affected by some of these archaic laws that we're seeing, this lack of the lack of consumption clubs and probably expungement, right? So their records are more likely to get arrested. But if you look around this crowd, you don't see a lot of people here that are learning about how to vacate their records, or how can we help reach out to them and get more people involved so that they know, so they can better their lives.
Wow,
that's for everybody.
Great question. I was like, I might pass on that, but I would defer to Dominic in that they are doing stuff with legislation. Right now, if you go back there and ask me, can I vacate my misdemeanor? I have to spend 20 minutes with you trying to figure out how to get that done and whether I can do it. If you want to vacate more than one misdemeanor, you can't. You can only vacate one. But if I want to go vacate 5 felonies, that's not a problem as long as I do them one at a time. These laws are ridiculous. There's stuff that has to be done, so I'll defer to you if you have more to say on that.
Well, I think that I really don't. I think that what I said we're doing is the thing that will help a lot. And obviously working with Pete and getting his support with the vehicles. and his leadership. And that's how Pete became city attorney, was as a criminal justice reform candidate. And so it's great to have him out there with us. He's a huge ally and resource. There's also in Spokane actually did it. Maybe you know a little bit more of the details than I do, but Spokane did it right away after I-502. They got, was it an automatic vacation?
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so this can happen on the local level, and that creates pressure and a conversation where people are embarrassed not to do it because it just makes so much sense. The politics are just not relevant anymore about that. It should be low-hanging fruit. And like I said, I do think that the main problem here is asking the state to foot the bill for things is a political no-go in the legislature for the most part. So we want to assemble a broad coalition of people to do it that aren't just cannabis people, and also that we're working with the ACLU and working with King County and working with the City of Seattle and other folks that are, really getting this conversation up and running. Because if it doesn't happen up and down the West Coast, I don't think they're going to care about it as much on the East Coast. So if we can make sure that that's a regional thing, I think we can help make this happen in the rest of the country. It's a small step. I admit it, it's a totally small step. When it comes to reparations for the drug war and what it's done to communities, it's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. It's just a start. But I believe it's a conversation starter, and an effective one at that. I think it's got a lot of potential to ripple out. And so that's how I'm thinking about it.
I'd like to add to that, that's another way, because what Danielle said in part was, look around. You would think in this crowd we would have a full room, and I think there's a couple problems. One is terminology, right? And legalese, that's something that most people don't even know what you're referring to. Two is that, or what we can do about that, I think is a better way to frame it, is, we hang out with a lot of people who used cannabis for a long time. We hang out with people who have been victims of the drug war. If we start talking about it and telling people and asking them to tell people, just say, look, you should know for free, you can have somebody tell you whether or not you can get this off of your record and quit worrying about it, because it's a terrible burden, even if it's just a misdemeanor. It's a burden that is unnecessary. So, I would ask that anybody in here, everybody in here, just talk to 5 people over the weekend and tell them that this is a possibility. And the more you do that, the more we have momentum behind people who will then push to do the legislative agenda, to get this stuff done on the top, because it'll be visible, it'll be happening, and people will be getting relief.
I'd like to add one more thing too, Mitzi, thank you. There's just so many resources here in Seattle that people can get help for with vacating their criminal records. Cultiva Law, you guys are doing a great service here. Also year-round, I do a lot of pro bono work for the King County Bar Association, and they actually have legal clinics where you can walk in and sign up for an attorney who's going to walk you through the process and be your attorney and your advocate all the way through. So yes, let's start the conversation at an individual level. Yes, tell 5 people, because there's so many resources out there and we want to help you. You just gotta speak up and let us do that for you.
All right, I gotta find 5 people now.
I didn't mean to give you homework, Danielle, I'm sorry.
No, we did though. I mean, everyone here at this table is an activist. Pete got the Activist of the Year award, I think last year, so join us.
Action steps are important, so if everybody does that, then we can start these movements, these grassroots movements, and really create change. That is all the questions that I have. Does the audience have any questions? Yes.
Since we're streaming live on Facebook, what are your favorite web links and social media sites?
All right, I'm going to repeat the question for the camera. what are your favorite web links and social media sites to get information around this topic, besides www.thecannabisalliance.us?
Which is the best place.
Like I said, the King County Bar Association is a really good resource for this. They have manuals for attorneys as well as non-attorneys as well, and it's 45 pages of gold. I'm telling you, check it out.
Just to be able to get an idea of what your criminal record might say. You can only do this for Washington State. It's Washington State specific. It might not be all encompassing, but Washington State Patrol watch reports. So if you just Google WSP watch, like the watch on your wrist, and reports, you can get your criminal history. Anybody can get anybody's criminal history. It's $10. You need your name and your date of birth.
I don't know if I have a favorite. I'd say for consumers, for people visiting Seattle, if we have tourists in town, leafly.com is really good. I think they have a lot of practical information. They talk about Hempfest, for instance, on Leafly. And then if you're going to do a little self-promotion, check out seattle.gov/law, and you can see what my office is doing on this. Thanks.
I would say just on a larger level for policy stuff, the Marijuana Policy Project's website is really good. That's kind of higher level, but they have, oh God, I did it again. They are very good about keeping their website up to date, which is a big problem. You can pull up information from somewhere and they haven't done anything to it for years. MPP is their, I'm a lawyer and I'm very anal retentive, and I have to make sure that my facts are correct even when I'm just talking to my son. So MPP is something that I feel like I can rely on, and so it can give you a lot of information about what's happening all over the country.
Oh, I guess I was skipped that. Well, I'd actually like to work with the Alliance to make sure that retailers are have like literature on this stuff. They're carrying it so that folks who are going to purchase cannabis can also find out about the non-market things that we'd like to make possible. So the Cannabis Alliance website will have the updates around expungement in particular. Everybody else's sites are great too.
And I will mention that the Cannabis Alliance is always looking for members. If this is something you want to be involved in, if this is something you want to help out with, then Dominic is our chair, and you can go to thecannabisalliance.us and you can sign up for membership and you can get involved and vote. That was the other big one that we talked about, is things that everybody can do.
And you don't have to be a lawyer to help.
No, you just have boots on the ground. Whatever your skills are things that we need. We want to channel what you're good at. Are there any other questions from the audience? Okay. Hey, before we close out, Pete, you had talked about, you want to talk about expungement vacationing as well as consumption clubs and research. Do you want to just touch on research a little bit before we close up?
And the consumption clubs, of course, are very important. And we tried to set up a model right after 502 passed. It was not outlawed under state law as it is now. We took some major steps back, but we have a model ordinance ready to go in Seattle if we can ever comply with the Clean Air Act and get some relief in Olympia. On research centers, there's no reason in the world that the city of Seattle isn't the research capital for cannabis. I'm talking for medical uses, I'm talking for growing techniques, for industrial applications. There's no reason that, for instance, the University of Washington in conjunction with WSU couldn't be really the center of gravity for research going forward. It's woefully inadequate because of prohibition. There has been next to no epidemiological data generated the way we need. Israel has gone way ahead of the United States, and there's no reason that the city of Seattle and our major universities can't be at the forefront of this, even with federal prohibition. There are ways that we can move forward.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate being up here with such amazing advocates for our communities and for helping all people, not just the more affluent, but the mass incarceration and people of color that have really been disenfranchised by prohibition. Let's give these guys a round of applause. And thanks so much.
Okay, friends, that was it for the legal panel. Thanks for coming.